Welcome to the LibertyDad podcast, where we prepare for tomorrow's political conversation by how we engage today. In this episode, I've invited Todd Hagopian for an interview for his bid for treasurer of the LNC, the Libertarian National Committee, for any of my non-libertarian viewers. These interviews are intended to be tough, and by tough, I don't mean hostile, but candidates will be put in a hot seat. The goal is to move away from interviews that are either too soft or too hostile and focus on how well they can communicate their fitness for a role. I feel like I'll have done my job if after this interview, the candidate later says to themselves, man, I should have said this. But the goal is not to embarrass people or give them an unfairly tough interview that leads people to believe that they are not ready for the role. It's simply to raise the bar with our expectations of leadership and how we interview, starting with communication. With that, let's dive right in and hear from Todd. Todd, welcome. How are you?
I am fantastic. Thank you for having me.
Awesome. Well, let's get right into it, and let's go ahead and introduce yourself and tell people what motivated you to run for LNC treasurer.
Sure. So my name is Todd Hagopian. I'm a businessman. Been in business for about 20 years. Came to the LP in around 2016, right after it became clear that Donald Trump was going to win the nomination for the Republicans. I decided that the party had left me, decided to come over to the LP, and have been involved ever since, both in Oklahoma State LP, now in National LP.
Okay, it looks like we're having a lag issue.
The reason I am running for this from that of an accountant.
Sorry.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you. You kind of dropped off there. Everything froze. So I don't know if there's anything that, I imagine there's nothing you can do on your end. I'm not sure if there's anything on my end that's going on.
All right. Sorry. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Okay. So the reason I'm running is very simple. It's for one reason. I want to turn this role from that of an accountant to that of a CFO. We need to turn the role into a strategic role where we're not only reporting the numbers, but we're analyzing it. We're not only compiling the numbers, but we're doing something with it and taking action. We're giving not only oversight, but also recommendations on how to do a better job. And that's what I want to take this role. That's what I've done here in Oklahoma. And that's what I wanted to bring to the National Committee so that we can avoid some of the things that we have seen just recently on the LNC.
Okay. So let me ask you, since you dove right into, some of the same reasons from, there's an image that I recall. Now, I came across this image. It's actually a post that you had made back in November. And I came across it because, a former LNC chair had been questioning you, and I kind of jumped in and, had my say on the matter, or I asked my own question and you answered it, and that's fine. And then I noticed that there was the origin of this question was responding to that very post. So I'm going to put that up on the screen. Of course, we've already talked ahead of time. You won't be able to see that, but people watching it will be. So now it's up on the screen. This is the first half of it because it was a relatively a sizable post. And so you were talking about, you just mentioned that you look at this role more like a CFO. And the first thing you said is that CFOs should be providing the following: financial vision, financial analysis, and financial strategy. So what does that mean in terms of the LNC? What is your vision? What is your analysis? What is your strategy?
Yeah. So vision would be, we have to be putting together a 3 to 5 year plan. Now, everyone's going to push back and say, well, you're only going to be treasurer for 2 years, and Angela might only be chair for 2 years, and blah, blah, blah. Doesn't matter. CEOs get fired every day. You always have a 5-year strategy in place, a 5-year long-term plan where you outline your goals, and then you come up with your strategies on how you're going to get there. And those goals may change over time as leaders change, but you need to all be driving in the same direction. So first things first, you come up with your goals, and that's not necessarily me, but that's me helping the board come up with the goals. And then from there, I would need to come up with these strategies on how to accomplish those goals. So if we're going to spend X on ballot access and we're going to drive X in fundraising and supply Y for candidate affiliate support and whatnot, then we need to come up with those strategies. What those strategies could look like is taking a look at our ROI on different types of on direct mail and get a way worse ROI. I think the ROI is around 100% on direct mail. It's around 12,000.
Okay, you froze up again. So pause for just a moment here. Pause for a moment. It looks like you're frozen.
Got me now?
Okay, so you're not frozen at the moment. You back? Hello?
Okay.
Having some internet issues here. All right. Looks like
Okay.
you're all right. Looks like you're back there. It showed your internet connection in the red there, so
Okay. Sorry about that.
must be because you're so
All
far
right.
away.
Yeah, it's that. It's probably Oklahoma and all this wind we get up here.
Gotcha. All right. So you were mapping out like what a CFO should do. They should have the vision. They should have that analysis. They should strategize. And then you were just mentioning like I think 100%. This is where it started to break up, but I
Okay,
think you were mentioning
got it.
about 100% ROI
So
on the mailers.
yeah, so you take a look at that different ROI on the different fundraising activities that you're doing and try to figure out how much money you should be placing in each bucket, right? So we make about 100% ROI on direct mail. We make about 12,000% ROI on online fundraising. So the question is why do we continue to spend a ton of money and resources and time on direct mail and not increase? It's actually gone down year over year,
Mm-hmm.
how much money we're going to spend on online fundraising, while at the same time, we're budgeting an increase in total fundraising. So we've lowered the amount we're going to spend on the most profitable fundraising, and we've increased the amount we're going to spend on the least profitable fundraising and decided that that's going to net a better result. And obviously over the first 3 months of the year, we can tell that that hasn't come true. So you come up with these strategies on how you're going to accomplish the goal, and then you help the staff implement them. And it's not about telling the staff everything to do. It's about showing seasonality and cyclicality. Those things are not in the budget today. So what months are we going to make the most? What months are we going to lag? Let's make sure we have a cash flow that's going to work for the business and figure out when to spend the money and when to right now. And part of that reason is because this long range plan doesn't exist.
Okay. And so have you started putting one together already? Do you already have a vision and a strategy and even an analysis?
Well, so first of all, that wouldn't be my vision. That would be the vision of the chair,
Okay.
likely. However, what I think the actual LNC today knows the major buckets, right? Because they
Okay.
break them out on their budget today.
Okay.
It's candidate support, affiliate support, fundraising, ballot access, and potentially these special projects that they budget in each year, right? So those are kind of
Okay.
the buckets. So the special projects that'll come up to the chair or the board or
Mm-hmm.
whatever they want to do, but the basic candidate support, affiliate support, ballot access, and fundraising all need to have long range goals assigned to them. So this is the category. Yes, we all know each of those four things are important. What is the goal, right?
Okay.
The goal appears to be, let's spend as much as we can on state affiliate training, you know what I mean? And let's fundraise as much as we can, and let's make sure we have ballot access. Those aren't goals, right?
Okay.
So you need goals that are very specific and measurable and attainable.
Okay.
And you need to be accountable afterwards. If you don't hit them, you need to figure out why you didn't hit them so that you can change those strategies going forward.
Okay. So when I'm looking at this post here, it said CFOs provide the following, and then you point out financial vision, financial analysis, financial strategy. So I guess when I'm reading it, I'm hearing that you're going to provide it, but then you just said that Angela, it would be actually her vision. So do you not have any vision at all? Or are you just kind of working with the chair's vision and saying like, look, I'm going to implement your vision? Or is there like a minor vision maybe that you do have that you can implement as an officer on the board or the
Sure.
LNC?
So good question and fair question. So yes, no, it is not my vision to make. As a treasurer, you aren't electing me to come up with the vision. You're
Okay.
electing me to come up with how to implement that vision.
Okay.
If you were to ask me what I think we need to do, I would say that what I could offer is a vision on what the budget would look like.
Hmm.
And this is what I mean by that. There is far too much money today that is basically unassigned, which means if you dive into the budget, and I don't care how deep you dive, there's about 25% of the budget that is completely unassigned, unattached to any program or budget, except for what they call general and management, okay,
Okay.
expenses.
Okay.
That is not allowed by GAAP. It's just not allowed. It has actually been found as a significant exception on our audit reports more than once.
Hmm.
They've been told to fix it and they haven't done it. So as a treasurer, what I can tell you is that the vision would be, is that you will know where every dollar that is spent is going.
Okay.
It will all be put towards specific programs so that you know that 18% of your membership fee went towards candidate affiliate support,
Mhm.
and 22% of your membership fee went towards fundraising. It won't be that 25% of your membership fee went towards this illegal pot of money that is undefined and does not adhere to the GAAP principles, if that
Okay.
makes sense.
Okay. What is the GAAP principle? Because I am not an accountant, nor am I a treasurer. So,
And nor am I, but I do understand
or
GAAP.
I'm not a financial
Yeah.
person. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, so essentially what it means is you have to be able to budget your dollars to specific functions.
Hmm.
Okay, so let's say you are a $100,000 employee and you spend 80% of your time on fundraising and 20% of your time on affiliate.
Hmm.
Okay, then 80,000 gets put in the fundraising bucket and 20,000 gets put in the affiliate bucket. And that's how your $100,000 is
Hmm.
characterized. Okay.
Okay.
And that way, at the end of the year, you can say, okay, this is how all of the money was spent. The LNC has what they call a general and management expenses column that's not allowed
Like at all.
by
Like,
GAAP. It may be technically allowed, but it's not supposed to be. It's
okay.
supposed to be minuscule, if anything,
Sure.
like pennies. Do you know what I
Okay.
mean? So it went since the time that they started calling this out in multiple audits, telling them to fix it. It is not only not gotten smaller, it's doubled. And it's now almost $500,000 as of 2020.
Okay.
And so $500,000, that's just not defined on where the money went. And the scary part of that deal isn't that it's 500,000, it's that they actually tried to put the money into these buckets. There's a spot showing most of the salaries got put into these buckets. So why haven't the other $500,000 of expenses been put into these buckets? It's either lack of effort or lack of transparency. Those
Okay.
are the only two options, because
Okay.
you know how the money is being spent. So make it clear to the membership. And once you start accounting for every penny, then you can start making better decisions with your money.
Okay.
Then we can look at it and say, you get all too often when you ask these questions, it's happened for the last several months where I've asked these questions, like, why do we have so much staff? Why, how much money are we spending on this? Well, it's complicated. No, it's not complicated. That's not how GAAP works. It's not complicated. You just have to do the work.
Okay. That's interesting, and this is not a concept that I'm necessarily familiar with. So, I'm trying to think off the top of my head before we move on if I have any further questions on that particular topic. We might circle back to that if something comes up,
Sure.
in the sometime during the interview. But for now, we'll just go ahead and move along. So, okay. So I get what you're saying now. So your role is, if I understand you, you're saying your role is to come in and say, look, I'm going to make sure that the documentation and that things are going where they're supposed to be going. So if we have this column that says generic or general, we're going to tighten that up, and we're going to start putting things where they're supposed to go. So if there's out of $500,000, $10,000 is going to, column, it should be in column A, whatever that is, then we're going to put it there and reduce that 500,000 down to 490,000. And we're just going to keep chipping away until we're down darn near zero. Correct?
Take it one step further than that. Okay. Because I think I got a little down the rabbit hole with the gap procedure.
Mm-hmm.
The reason all of that is important, the reason that entire discussion is important, is because what you have to do as a treasurer is, once the goals are laid out, you have to come up with the most efficient strategy on how to reach the goal. So if I know that you're trying to raise $2.4 million, I need to come up with the most efficient strategy for us to raise $2.4 million. And that might look like spending $300,000 on this part of fundraising and $200,000 on that part of fundraising. But if there's this $500,000 bogey out there, I just don't know how much of that money is being spent on fundraising.
Okay.
And what will inherently happen is, when you ask that question, people will say, well, there's this big amount of money over here being spent on fundraising. But then if you ask the same question on state affiliate, they'll say, well, there's this big bunch of money over here being spent on state affiliate. That big bunch of money is being spent on everything. No matter what you ask, that's what it's being spent on.
Okay.
You know what I mean? That way,
right.
That way they're covered. And so my point is you have to get specific so that you can start figuring out the most efficient way to spend the money in order to accomplish the goal, which is where the real strategy and execution of a treasurer come in. And so when I talk about vision, that's what I'm talking about. Okay. You want 50 state ballot access? Let me come up with the best way, along with the ballot access committee, come up with the best way to get there at the cheapest cost. That's where the treasurer value add comes in.
Okay. Gotcha. And since we mentioned it, have you spoken to any of the LNC candidates for chair about their vision already?
Yeah. So Angela and I are very close. I understand, what I'm going to let her lay out her vision, but I understand for the most part what she wants to do. And I am ready to support it. So I know, it's same things. It's the same buckets we're all talking about. It's just a matter of making smart goals, specific measurable goals that we can then attack and put together a plan around. And so, yeah, I've talked with her. I've listened to all the debates. I know where everyone's coming from. Dasbach wants to increase membership and make sure we have ballot access. And Tony seems to be kind of all around, let's go after all four of these buckets. Angela's going to go after increasing membership. And that's going to be her big thing, increasing membership and fundraising and growing the party and getting stronger on messaging. All those things can be attained inside of the same budget. Once somebody gives me the directions, I can come up with a plan.
Okay, good. So you're familiar with all the chairs, and you're prepared, no matter who wins, to support them in their vision, and then take your skill set and help them be successful.
Yeah, the one thing that you always find in business is that you never get to pick your boss, right?
Right.
So I wouldn't to run for this if I wasn't ready to serve under any chair.
Okay. So speaking of your skill set, and I'm going to switch over to the next picture that I've got here. And that's just basically the other half of that post that you had made. So you can take a look at that. So you've got here, a number of things. We're not going to go into them like deep dive or anything like that. I wouldn't even know how to ask some of these questions, but in fact, some of these, I'm not like, former financial advisor and bank manager. That seems pretty self-explanatory. Presented a 100+ page deck to Buffett's number 3. And you were the treasurer for your campaign, for your own campaign. How did that work out? Tell me a little bit about how, because you ran a campaign, but you were also your own treasurer. Right.
Yeah. So, what you're allowed to do.
Right. So tell me, it's kind of a weird question, but I guess, grade yourself, can you look back and say, you know what, here's what I did and I was really strong with, here's what I did. And you know what, I really made some boneheaded mistakes or whatever.
Yep, sure. So It was a great campaign, a lot of fun. I was lucky enough to draw a one-on-one race with a Republican,
Hmm.
which was imperative actually, because you have to get 2.5% in a statewide race in Oklahoma to qualify for ballot access for the next 4 years.
Okay.
It turns out, we didn't know that at the time, but it turns out that nobody else qualified in November, and my race did, which qualified us for ballot access for the next 4 years. So had I not run, we would have been in more trouble than we are right now. So got into the race, started with a bang, kind of did 50 statewide, fundraising on Twitter and this and
Hmm.
that, and wasn't huge. Didn't need it to be huge. $10,000 was always the goal. Basically, get $10,000, run the first TV ad ever for a Libertarian, and get the first billboard ever for the Libertarian. Those were kind of the goals, the goalposts that I set. And then the third one was get the most votes ever for a third-party candidate in Oklahoma. So as you can see, what I did right off the bat was I set my goals. Okay, this is what I'm going to accomplish. I'm going to get Libertarians on TV. I'm going to get Libertarians on billboards, and I'm going to get the most votes ever for a third-party candidate in Oklahoma. Those were the goals. So about 2 months into the campaign, I got laid off during COVID. So immediately had to cease just about everything I was doing. Didn't cease the campaign, didn't pull out, didn't do any of that stuff, but kind of stopped fundraising and started trying to figure out what the hell I was going to do. You know what I mean? Because in that level in business, typically when you get laid off, you go and run another business, and there's like a 98% chance that would not be in the state you're in, right?
Okay.
Because there's 49 other states. So
Right.
so I wanted to be very careful with my next move, because I was worried that that potentially I was going to have to move out of state before the election. So I slowed down. That's probably my biggest regret, because within 60 days I decided, yes, I'm going to stay in Oklahoma. I'm going to start my own business, this and that. And had I kept going, I had a lot of momentum at that point. Had I kept going, I probably could have raised a significantly more amount of money. My second biggest look back and regret probably is that because of COVID, a lot more people than I anticipated used early voting.
Okay.
In Oklahoma, they have straight line ballots, which not every state has, but basically you can click a button and vote Republican all the way down the ballot, or Democrat. So had I had the foresight to understand that that there was going to be a ton of early voting because nobody was going to want to be at the polls, I probably would have attacked the Democrats because there was no Democrat running, and tried to specifically get it in front of them to not pick straight line ballot. Because if they picked a straight line ballot, they just didn't vote for anybody in my race because there was no Democrat. Whereas if they didn't pick a straight line ballot, they could have done all Democrats and then picked me. What we did right is we did get a TV ad. And so it did play in both Oklahoma City and Tulsa. Okay. We got 10 billboards. And so that went up in Oklahoma City and Tulsa. Another regret probably was I could have gotten a lot more billboards and gone into the rural areas. But I did the Tulsa and Oklahoma City so that the OKLP could learn a lot more for future elections. So I did it on purpose. But I could have actually won specific precincts and possibly counties had I gone a different direction with that.
Okay. Well, it sounds like you had a good campaign. So kudos to that. And too bad that I wasn't around to, like in Oklahoma to actually watch it. I would like to see, because you said it was a statewide, correct?
Yep.
Yeah. So I would love to see a really good statewide campaign, just because I'm newer to the party. So I'm not as familiar, and I don't, I know some of the people that have been around a while. They're like, oh yeah, so-and-so had a great one, blah, so, they can name some of the names. I really can't. So I'm looking forward to seeing some of these. And as I'm looking at some of this, like you've got, running businesses at 3 Fortune 500 companies, and, you own 2 businesses presently. Is that correct?
3 as of this morning.
Okay. 3 as of this morning.
Yes.
And then, so let me ask, and I guess I'm trying to think of how I want to phrase this question, but you've demonstrated some financial acumen in the business world. Now tell me how that translates to the nonprofit world, or an organization where people aren't necessarily getting paid. And if
Right.
you
So
and,
great
and hopefully
question.
hopefully you understand the nature of that, but if you need any further, I
No,
can go.
completely get it. I get that question quite a bit. And at the end of the day, I think people give nonprofits a little too much credit for being different. Um,
Okay.
it's all the same. You have goals, you have certain levers that you can pull to reach those goals.
Hmm.
The biggest difference between the business world and the nonprofit world is that they're not used to treating it like a business. Okay,
Okay.
nonprofits immediately, the first thing you'll hear are things like this, and this will sound familiar. Well, we can't spend that much money because we have no idea how much money we're going to get this year.
Right.
We don't know what's going to happen with the economy. We don't know what's going to happen with membership levels. And it's just impossible to tell. Okay, we hear
Hmm.
that every state says that, right?
Right.
That is the dumbest thing I've ever heard. That's like me at a company saying, I have no idea how many shopping carts I'm going to sell this year because I have no idea what the economy is going to do. And I have no idea how many people are going to buy ours versus the competition. You can use those words in any business in the entire country.
Hmm.
It's not an acceptable response. There are always ways to figure these things out. So when I came to the OKLP and became the treasurer, we had about a $6,000 budget. And that was the answer. The answer was there's no way that we can guess how much revenue we're going to have coming in. And I just did a quick analysis and said, okay, how many new members are we bringing in on a monthly basis? When are the biggest spikes where they're going to fall off? Go month by month and look at what the membership is going to look like. How much money is each member bringing in per year for us? How long are they staying members? You can start to come up with, I think we came up with every member is worth $288 to the OKLP.
Hmm.
Okay, so $288 over the lifetime of living in Oklahoma. That's how much the member is going to be worth.
Okay.
Some of them are going to be $24. Some of them are going to be $1,000. Okay, but if that's the case, if you're going to make $288 every time you bring in a member, then why wouldn't you spend $20 to go out and get one? Right?
Okay.
How many times would you make that trade? If I said every time you give me $20, I'm going to give you $288 back. Right? Like
Okay.
you're going to just keep doing it as often as you can. So the point is once we broke it down like that, then it was like, okay, so how do we spend more money to get more membership? Right? So we did a lot of different things, but at the end of the day, what we ended up doing is I came out with an ambitious budget. Instead of $6,000 or so revenue and expenses, I put it out at 17. So triple. I said, we're going to bring in $17,000 this year.
Okay.
And this is how we're going to spend it. We're going to spend every single cent. If we start to miss, and this is important because it's the thing that the LP didn't do, the LNC didn't do this year. If you start to miss, these are our levers to pull back real quick. Okay. So these are the slip slides. These are the slip projects that we won't do. What happened? We brought in 20,000 and we spent 3,000 extra on filing fees. And now for the first time ever, we spent money on filing fees and we have 7 statewide candidates on our ballot. So every single Oklahoma voter is going to have at minimum 7 libertarians on their ballot in November.
Good.
And that was because we set an extreme goal, came up with specific actions around how we were going to get there. Everybody had their roles to play, the entire budget. Every single person has a line item that was attributed to them. They couldn't do anything without the XCOM voting on it, but this is what they were in charge of, and they had to come up with plans around it.
Mm-hmm.
And we tripled our revenue.
So is this, congratulations, by the way, is this attitude something that really surprises you when you hear it? Of like, we can't spend this money because we don't know. Is it something?
No, I mean, it's shocking. What's
But
even worse
common?
is almost
isn't it common though in nonprofit organizations? So let me ask you then, because I feel like there's a bit of a clash there, right? On one hand, we're saying, hey, like I find this kind of surprising, but on the other hand, we're saying this is a common thing to be said. So should it really be surprising if you're wanting to take on a treasurer role?
what I would say is it's common among smaller nonprofits.
Hmm.
You don't hear the LNC saying it.
Oh, okay.
When you've got larger organizations that have a ton of members and
Hmm.
their automatic renewals and this and that, you don't hear it as often. You may see it. You may
Okay.
see a terrible budget that is way off because they didn't do this analysis,
Okay.
but you don't hear that as much. In the smaller organizations, you do. And so that's the other thing that I think is kind of funny, like the LNC, they decided to raise their fundraising target year over year. And there was nobody saying, whoa, how are we going to do this? There probably should have been. There should have been a little more analysis that went into it. But the smaller organizations is where people say that they can't manage it. And that's when most of the people that challenge me with the question that you're asking are doing so because they've been on a state board. They've had this trouble
Hmm.
where they can't estimate it. So therefore they think that all nonprofits are like that. I
Okay.
guarantee you, if you look at the Red Cross or if you look at the ACLU or any of these, organizations, they have a very good idea of what revenue streams are coming in and how they can pull those levers.
Okay. So you don't anticipate, um, so assuming you get elected, you don't anticipate having a difficulty with the other members of the board in that area. Like people are already primed or they're already going to be ready to start looking, even if they haven't actually done it. So you don't expect to have to convince anybody then, correct?
Yeah, so I mean, here's the deal on that. So first of all, you've got a budget in place already.
Hmm.
So you can't just come in and rip everything
Okay.
up, right? The budget's there. You got to work to it. So chances are you've got upwards of 6 months before you actually have to approve your next budget, which
Okay.
is where most of my work will come in. Now, I'll obviously have opinions on how to spend the money
Hmm.
over the first 6 months, and if we have to make cuts, where those cuts should be. If we
Right.
come up with excess, where we should excess, you know what I mean, and those kinds of things. What should we do with the debt? Like I'll be very vocal on all of those issues. But to actually come up with a new budget and get people aligned with new strategy, that's going to be a 6 month process, which is absolutely plenty of time. We had 2 months or 3 months at the OKLP between election to new budget. And it was more than enough time to not only get everybody on board. I mean, the budget was done in a month, and then we had 2 months of debate, and then it went into place. You know what I mean? It doesn't take that
Okay.
long to do a budget, even a complicated one. It
Hmm.
doesn't take that long to do. And again, not all the new ideas are going to come from me. Most of my thing is going to be evaluating the ideas that are out there
Hmm.
and trying to show which are best and why,
Okay.
not come up with brand new ideas that you've never heard of.
Hmm. Okay. All right. So say you get elected, say within about 6 months, we should start hearing some direction as far as financial direction and maybe even, some of this breakdown that you're talking about.
Yeah, I mean,
Okay.
you'll hear me talk about our finances well before that. You'll
Okay.
see a brand new budget by November because
Okay.
that's when you do the budget,
Hmm.
and then it gets approved in December for the following year. So you will see me active in all financial discussions on the
Hmm.
board from now until then, but you will see the actual culmination of the strategy and the vision and stuff like that the first time we actually get to put together a new budget.
Hmm. Okay. So since you're talking about, you kind of mentioned like, I think you mentioned it. Something spurred me in the mind. So at any rate, one of the things that a lot of people are talking about right now that I see now, mind you, I don't necessarily follow the LNC dutifully. So I'll get on there
Mhm.
occasionally. I'll read the list. I might pop in like some of the different Facebook groups where people are talking about some things, but I don't really get too deep involved in necessarily the workings and what they're necessarily doing. But one thing that I have seen that it has been a bit of a concern for people. There's been a couple charts that come out, and I've disagreed with them, and I went and I did my own research, and I determined that these are the membership charts and how many members. And so there's been all this concern, like, are we losing members? And a lot of blame is placed on the Mises Caucus, and I don't think that's quite so accurate, because when I start looking at things, I say, well, it looks like it's a natural progression. Post election years, you have a relative increase, and then you have a drop, and then when I look at past years, I'm like, we're still doing better than past years. But that doesn't necessarily mean that we're doing good. Like we can't be doing any. That just means that we're not doing any worse than we were once upon a time. So regarding donors, is outreach to say large donors, or is that something within your purview, or even making plans to try to bring in more donors? Is that something, or are you literally just like, I'll sit down and I'll look at the ideas and tell you about it from a financial perspective?
Yeah, so fair question. Every LNC member should be reaching out and
Hmm.
doing donor calls, whether
Okay.
those are large donors or small donors. Every LNC member should be doing that.
Hmm.
However, the LNC donor basically bucket of people, so there is an actual bucket in the budget for how much LNC members need to go out and raise. Okay. It is less than 3% of the total revenue.
Hmm.
So I see this not from you, but I see this when people kind of say, what are you going to commit to bringing in? It's a gotcha question. You know what I mean? It doesn't matter if I am 18% more effective on the fundraising spend that I just blew away all the rest of the LNC members combined. Do you know
Right.
what I mean? So yes, will I make donor calls? Yeah. Am I gonna double our fundraising because I made donor calls? No. It's,
Right.
it might go from 3% to 3.5%. So yeah, I'll do it, but that's definitely not where I can add value. There's an equation I like to use, and it's called activity times efficiency
Hmm.
equals success. Okay,
Okay.
so if you are 20% more active and you're 20% more efficient,
Hmm.
you can get 44% better results. Okay,
Okay.
so if you do 20% more analysis on the budget and you find a way to do 20% more on the budget, you know what I mean? You can be 44% more effective than the person who's currently working. You know what I mean? These are the kinds of things that would actually make a difference on a $2 million budget, not me getting one more $8,000 donor. But, I will do it. It's just not something that I'm out there saying, yes, I'm going to go out and raise $100,000. I don't think that's where the benefit I bring to the party is, if that makes
Okay.
sense.
That's fair. No, all my questions are going to be, some of them will be out of just straight out of ignorance. I
Yep.
will be flat honest.
No, that's good.
This, so, treasurer
Now, if I could
finances.
real quick on your other,
Yeah, go ahead.
yeah, if I could, if you don't mind, go back to the other part where you were talking about whether we're up or down. I think this is a really important point to make.
Oh, yes. On the number
So
of
as
donors.
you said, yes, as you said, if you actually look back at history, it tells a very different story than what everyone's telling today. I've
Yes.
tried to make this point in some of the groups. The average midterm year after a presidential year
Hmm.
is down about 25% in fundraising. Okay, from presidential year to midterm. We are down in the realm of 25% from presidential year to midterm.
Hmm.
Okay, so why is everybody freaking out? Everyone's freaking out because we budgeted it to go up midterm fundraising higher than presidential year fundraising. So now everyone's freaking out because we had a terrible budget put in place. There were no reasons given that this year would buck the trend so dramatically. So we put this in place. Not only that, but we put it in place in a straight line budget. So we took the total amount of fundraising, we divided it by 12, and that became your monthly fundraising target. And that is
Okay.
not how fundraising works. It's very cyclical and very seasonal.
Hmm.
And so the beginning of a convention year, you get less fundraising because people are spending more of their money on convention. And that is well known. It's not hard to look at the numbers and understand this, but that's not how it was budgeted. So now everyone's like, oh my God, we missed by 25%, we missed by 25%. And I said, we did, and that's terrible budgeting, but it doesn't necessarily mean our hair is on fire. We shouldn't be having to take out a loan because of a cash crunch that was 100% foreseeable.
Hmm.
You know what I mean? All these things could have been done with just a minimal amount of budgeting expertise, which would include things like working seasonality into the numbers, looking at history,
Hmm.
and not not basically approving a budget that is a wish list. There is still, not to this day, has anyone told me why they thought that this year would be so dramatically different than every other midterm year for the last 3 to 4 elections, that they reversed the trend by over 25%. It's baffling.
Wow. I was not aware of that. But speaking of taking out loans, I've seen a little bit here, and I've seen that you've been chiming in on this conversation. Here's the drawback. The only question I have is, are you familiar? Well, let me lead up to that. Are you familiar with the Reddit, the subreddit, Explain It Like I'm 5?
No, but I can do that.
Okay.
I can imagine what it says.
So people will go in there and they will ask a question. Sometimes there'll be difficult questions. Sometimes there'll be just something that somebody doesn't know. And they're like, look, explain this to me like I'm 5. So if you will, because I've tried to follow it, I think what I lack is antecedent information. Okay. And so explain this issue with the loan like I'm 5, because I've seen that you've been engaging in a lot of conversation. So it seems like you know what you're talking about. Just based on what I can read and somewhat understand. So what generated the problem? How do we get here? What's the solution? Where do we go?
Yeah. And I'll warn you, I am getting a couple of internet unstable things showing up. So if I drop off, I'll come right back on.
Sure.
Let me first state it like this. We had a shortfall in money, which I'll get to in a second. Therefore, something had to be done. Okay. What the LNC tried to do was essentially do a rapid fire online vote to approve a loan for way more money than we needed. So when you saw me being vocal and trying to elevate the issue, that was why I was doing it. It had nothing to do with caucus. Had nothing even to do with my election. It was more about what in the hell are you doing? This is not the way to make a massive financial decision. Okay, so that being said, stepping back, because of the mismanagement of the budget that I mentioned just a few minutes ago, suddenly we have a cash crunch, which was 100% foreseeable. Now we don't have enough cash for what we decided, because not only did they straight line the revenue, they did the same thing with the expenses. So even though ballot access expenses come earlier in the year, that's not how they were budgeted. They were budgeted throughout the year. So now all of a sudden we have less revenue and more expenses than we planned. So now we don't have any money. That's what got us into the situation. Okay. Now you have 3 options for that. I think one important distinction here is that they're saying that there is this money in this other account that will be released after the convention. So keep that in mind, that they are saying that they have this extra money that will be released in May or June. Okay. We haven't seen that, but that's what they say. So now you got a shortfall, and theoretically you have a solution in June. Okay. But in the meantime, you need money. You have 3 options. You can put it on a credit card at 9.15% interest. You can put it on a home equity loan, basically, that is a loan against the headquarters at 4% interest. It's variable, but 4% today, for $250,000. Or you can put it on a business asset loan that basically is secured by other business assets, not the real estate, at 3.5%.
Okay.
The credit card has no origination fee because you can just swipe the credit card. The home equity loan has a $3,400 origination fee, costs $3,400 to set it up. And the business asset loan has a $1,200 origination fee. Those are kind of the math. Okay, so get away from the math for a minute. You have to pick one, let's say you have decided you have to spend this money. Okay. The credit card makes the most sense if you are actually going to pay it off in 6 weeks or 8 weeks. Okay. Because there's no origination fee. It can be 20% interest. It'll still be cheaper. You don't have to outlay $1,200 or $3,400 on day one.
Right.
Okay. The home equity loan makes the most sense if it's going to be a very long-term need and you're not going to pay it off short, because that $3,400 origination fee basically makes it a terrible idea unless you're going to carry a balance for an extended period of time, or unless you're going to need it again in the future. So the business asset loan was the right move if you needed the money, but there was a risk that it would stay on for a while, because it's a lower interest rate than the home equity and a lower origination fee. So it's basically lower everything. And this
Right.
is why I was so mad, is it was, I mean, okay, you have all these choices. Why not pick the one with the lowest interest rate and the lowest fee, if you are worried that it's going to stretch on, which is what
Mhm.
they were making the argument for. So that's why I originally got angry. The second reason is because when they came out and said they wanted a $250,000 loan, inside the motion, they said they're going to pull 50,000 out for ballot access right away. And they're going to pull 85,000 out for the Frontier project right away.
Mhm.
And they wanted access approval, pre-approval, to spend another 50,000 at will, basically, if they needed it for operating expenses. So essentially, they were asking for $185,000 of leeway directly off of this credit line. And nobody was explaining why they needed it. The LNC costs $80,000 a month to run. Our worst fundraising month so far has been $100,000. There's no reason that the operating expenses are in danger at the moment. Plus, we're about to get all this money supposedly from convention. So there is no reason for the 50. So throw that out. $50,000 in operating expenses, that was a stupid request, not to mention it's against the bylaws, but we'll talk, we don't even have to talk about that. It's not allowed. Second was the 50,000 in ballot excess. Okay, I get it. They've talked extensively about it. That probably was necessary. Now the Frontier project, why do we need $85,000 in a lump sum? What is it funding? Nobody will say. Had to go into executive session to talk about what that money was for. And they came out saying, okay, we can deal with 30. So at the end of the day, sorry, that was definitely not a 5-year-old answer,
That's
but
okay.
stepping back, at the end of the day, they asked for a home equity loan with an immediate draw capacity of $185,000
Mhm.
And an immediate draw of $135,000. What we ended up with, because we made a stink, 6 people changed their vote on the board. 6 people who said yes changed their vote to a no. We
Mhm.
had a meeting. I spoke at the meeting. And we ended up with a business asset loan, as we should have, lower interest rate, lower origination fee. And we ended up only drawing $80,000 instead of $135,000 or $185,000.
Okay.
And all that took was 1 week of analysis, a little bit of math, and if no motion was put on the table.
Okay. So I want to ask you if you can speculate about why might we go into executive session to talk about how much money we are looking to spend for a project that I think, as far as I know, is relatively transparent and on, like the Frontier project isn't some secret project, or is it?
Yeah. Yeah. So I don't want to make that conspiracy theory. I don't think
Okay.
it is. I think this is what it came down to. I think that they wanted to fund the entire Frontier project before the new executive committee came on, so that it was funded for sure.
Okay.
So I think that was where the $85,000 came from. Okay, now that could be conspiracy, whatever. I think that's what ended up happening, is they wanted to make sure Apollo got his money to run the Frontier project. Not the best decision, but at least, whatever.
Sure.
The reason they had to go into executives, go ahead.
Yeah. No, I just said sure.
Yeah. So the reason they had to go into executive session, I believe, was around political strategy. And I don't fault them on that either. Okay.
Okay.
So let's say there was somebody who was going to run and they were going to pay their filing fee at the last second, right before the filing deadline.
Okay.
You know what I mean? Like, you don't
Okay.
necessarily want that in an open meeting where the Democrats could be listening,
Got it.
And I don't know that to be the case. I'm just, we literally in Oklahoma, we had a meeting like that. We did not go into executive session, but we could have, where we were deciding where to put our money at the last second for filing fees. You know what I mean? So I could see that being a reason. I could also see it being where Apollo is talking about who he might fund and who he might not versus commitments they've already made. And you don't want a candidate to hear that there's less confidence in somebody than somebody else. You know what I
Okay.
mean? Like there are
Got it.
reasons to go into executive session that I don't think are conspiratory. So I want to make sure I make it clear, like I was fine with that
Okay.
move into executive session. And I was happy that they came out of it instead of 85 at 30, you know.
Got it. Okay. So I think that helps me understand, the lay of the land, the situation, what's going on. And that question again, that was just, one of the various questions that I have that comes, purely out of ignorance. I know that when I talk to some of the members here in my affiliate, they, they would have some of these same questions. So I figured it was worth asking. So let's move on a little bit here. Since we've been talking about the budget, what's the biggest expense that the LP can cut,
So
in your
the
opinion?
biggest expense the LP can cut probably is in salaries.
Hmm.
And the reason that and when I say salaries, everyone gets all worked up. Go ahead and get worked up.
Right.
Salaries would include contractors. And if you
Okay.
look at the chart that I put out there, I think in November,
Hmm.
when the first budget draft came out, I showed that they essentially doubled their salaries and contractor salaries over the course of the last 4 years. Okay. But the revenue has gone up like 20%. Okay. So you don't double your salaries so that you don't make your salaries rise 500 so that you can make 400,000.
Hmm.
Okay. That's
Right.
not a good equation. Keep
Right.
making that trade and you're going to lose money in the long run.
Hmm.
On top of that, if you look at the org chart, which there's two coins here, two sides of the coin, one person will look at the org chart and say, look at all these unfilled salary positions. And I look at the org chart like, why would a business that's worth $2 million have 4 directors? Okay. There shouldn't be any directors. There should be an executive director and a whole bunch of people reporting to him. Okay.
Okay.
I've run $50 million businesses before. We've had in the neighborhood of 3 directors. I run a $2 million business now. We have none. Actually, I run two $2 million businesses now. We have none. No directors. We have a vice president in each one that's running it, and then no directors below them. You don't need that many directors in a small company. You need a much more flat organization. When I talk about running or showing a presentation to somebody who is, 2 behind Buffett, so the
Hmm.
number 3 to Buffett, that's not because he is making $500 million a year and he's next in line. It's because Buffett runs a flat organization. You hired somebody that can handle a bunch of direct reports.
Hmm.
So we just have too many, in my opinion. So I
Okay.
think salaries and contractor salaries is the biggest area where we could cut if we had to cut immediately.
Gotcha. Okay. Fair enough. And I am not squawking about anything. I'm just like, hey, it is what it is.
Yep.
Somebody comes in, they've taken a look at it, and I want to hear what you've come up with after you've taken a look at things.
Yeah. And just to be clear, I'm not saying that right this second salary levels are too high. I'm saying that salary levels in the budget are too high.
Okay.
There are open positions right now, and we may actually have the right amount of salary at the moment.
Okay.
Should we fill all the salary positions that are in the budget, it would be way too high.
Okay. Fair enough. Um, so last thing on the image that you had, let me pull that back up. I switched it over here real quick, so I'll pull it back up so that anybody that's watching. So on here, and let's see, where'd you go here? So on here, you've listed your commitment to the party, which looks outstanding. You served as the Northeastern Oklahoma Libertarian Party region chair. You ran a local school board race. I don't think I would want to I don't think I'd want to have anything to do with the school board other than to go and yell at them. But hey, kudos to you for even doing that. And then several other things. So here's my question. State conventions have been happening over the last few months. How many state conventions have you been to?
I've only been to 2 this go around. That was Michigan and Oklahoma.
Hmm.
I went to Arkansas last time around.
Okay.
But yeah, I have not spent, I haven't raised any money. I haven't asked for any money for my campaign.
Okay.
And I have decided not to ask for money so that I can fly around to different state conventions.
Okay. So how come you only went to 2 then?
How
did I
come
hear?
I went?
Yeah, you said two. You only went to two, Michigan and Oklahoma, right?
Yeah, so basically I only went to a convention if I had work nearby
Okay.
during the convention week. So
Okay.
Michigan, I planned work nearby so that I could hit it on purpose,
Right.
using my work trip as a way to get there.
Right.
And obviously I work for myself, so I could do that, if I wanted to, but that was the idea, is basically I'm not drawing any money specifically for this run.
Hmm.
So I was only going to go to conventions if I could manage a work trip around it. Michigan, I
Okay.
was able to.
Okay. And the reason I asked that is because I know that Angela's been to quite a few. Karen
Yeah.
Ann has been to some. I've been to a couple on her behalf. And then I know that Joshua Smith and Eric Rodsep, who are running, have been to some, as well as some of the other candidates like Tony. And I think
Yeah.
even Steve Dashbash. Is that how you say his name?
Dashbot,
Dashbach. So
I
I,
think I might be wrong. Yeah. Yeah.
if you're watching, Steve, apologies. But we gave it an honest effort.
Me
We did
too.
that.
Sorry, Steve.
So, but the reason I was asking that is because, you're running for, it's one of four officer roles, and so I'm just curious why you didn't feel the need to go to more conventions when your immediate peers, the fellow officers, were definitely going to as many as they could get to, because
Yeah.
there's plenty of reasons to ask why. You're a Mises member, so maybe it's good to, chance to interface with people, maybe break down some barriers, let people know what you're about, have this kind of conversation that you're having with me, maybe at a smaller scale, so explain your reasoning behind, not going.
Sure. Fair, completely fair question. So first of all, I had decided that I wasn't going to fundraise. That's
Hmm.
not a matter of being too lazy to fundraise. That's a matter of thinking that people have better things to do with their money than
Hmm.
to send some guy who has money around to these conventions, right?
Okay.
Second, I wasn't going to use my money. I got family obligations. I have 4 kids. I'm not going to use my money to go around to these, when everybody else is fundraising for them. Plus, I think the last thing is that's 2022. So I've had a whole bunch of videos that have been presented at these various things. I've had audios be presented at these various
Hmm.
things. They've had literature presented at these various things. I have 50,000 followers on Twitter that I talk to every single night. I have thousands of people on Facebook that I talk to every single night. I'm in all the delegate groups except for the one that kicked me out. So I mean, I have a lot of different ways that I'm talking to the delegates right now that didn't cost other people money to help me fund my way there. And frankly, everyone talks about why aren't we high on fundraising? Every time you take $100 from somebody, then that's $100 that's not going to something else, whether that's the OKLP or Mises
Hmm.
or National, and I just decided I wasn't going to do that.
Okay, fair enough. Fair enough. Let's see, where are we at on time here? I don't want to hold you up. Okay, so we're at about 1 hour, so I want to respect your time. I generally try to keep these at 1 hour. So let me ask you one final question, and then we'll just button it up. And that question is, you're one of 3 people, I believe, that is not only a Mises member, but also the Mises Caucus has formally endorsed. So 3 out of 4 of the officer roles. And we know that we're not going to get into all the turmoil that's with the Mises caucus. It's there. We know that there are a lot of people that are very anti-Mises. We also know there are people that are very pro-Mises. And then we know that there are some that are in between somewhere along the line, right? So what are you doing, or what do you envision yourself doing in the future? You can answer both of those as separate questions if you want. Um, to reach out to maybe the skeptics, the honest ones, the people that could be turned, but also could be turned either way.
Yep.
What are you doing there to kind of increase their confidence that, hey, despite the Mises label, Todd may be the right man for the job?
And that's a great question. So, first of all, it wasn't that long ago, but probably almost a month ago, I gave up my state organizer role for Mises.
Hmm.
After the convention, I helped get people ready to take over Oklahoma, and I shed my state organizer role. So I
Hmm.
kind of started to spread away from any official capacity with the Mises caucus. Um, I think I still give them $5 a month. I'm not even sure if that's
Hmm.
active right now. But that's the only role I have left with Mises. So started to separate that. I think that in the delegate groups and with these opinions on financial matters and questioning the budget and things like that, I've had a lot of discourse
Hmm.
with anti-Mises and neutral folks. One thing that you'll see in those conversations is that I never say the word Mises. Okay, so other people might bring it up, and I try and ignore it and stay on task and on issue. That probably had very little success up until recently when
Hmm.
the loan thing happened. I
Okay.
think what you saw is that everybody from all corners of the party rallied together and said, guys, we just paid off this building. What are we doing?
Hmm.
Let's apply some thought and some logic to this. And I think if you go back through those threads, you'll see a whole lot more good discussion. I think I had conversations with, you know, um, Brian Ellison and, some of the folks that are far over on the other side that we've talked about,
Hmm.
and talked to. And I think there was wide agreement that now is the time to put aside labels and actually have financial discussions about what's best for the party. And I think I've shown that I can have those discussions without ever bringing up caucus, and without having to bash anti-caucus and all that stuff. It's about looking at the numbers and figuring out what we did wrong and how we're going to fix it. Um, and so that's what I've been doing. I think that if people were to decide that they wanted to ask anybody in Oklahoma, I think what you'll find is that we have a great Mises caucus in Oklahoma that gets along with everybody.
Hmm.
And I think that you'll find that, I was dramatically elected treasurer, even though I'm Mises. We probably had 30% of the convention and I got like 70% of the vote. I'm a bipartisan, candidate in Oklahoma. People are fine with me on both sides because they know that I'll do what I do fiscally, regardless of caucus. I've never once been accused of doing anything for the
Hmm.
caucus,
Okay.
in any way, shape, or form. So, I am relying a lot on folks who actually know me to go out and tell those stories. I've had some super detractors in the party at different times. Aaron Adams is famous for absolutely hating me. I think in 2019, when I started running for chair, it's completely flipped and has a lot of good things to say about me.
Okay.
Now, when people asked about the race and whatnot, so I've just, I've tried to do my best to mend those relationships. I was on the phone last week talking to LNC all week, trying to get people ready for this meeting so that they understood my arguments. And none of those guys were Mises. I didn't call them Mises guys on the board, so
Okay.
they knew
Fair enough.
what. Yeah.
Gotcha. All right. Well, that sounds great. Do you have any final words to anybody before we close?
No, I apologize for that being extraordinarily boring. It's hard to make a treasurer run exciting.
I
So,
mean, that's fair.
uh,
No,
so,
we were going for just like, hey, let's see if we can't get a good interview
yeah,
and talk about some good stuff and just kind of see, hey, I want to help people decide on real matters, important matters, whether or not they want to vote for you. I don't want them to vote for you because, or not vote for you because, you didn't respond how they liked to, some drama that was going on recently or some, some meme that they saw or something. Like to me, those aren't good reasons to choose or not choose a leader. I want to talk about their fitness for the role. I want to talk about how they understand the party. I expect, and I think you've done a good job, that they understand the role way better than I do, especially for the treasurer. Because if I understand the treasurer role better than you, that's not good.
right.
So, so you've clearly demonstrated, I think, that you've understood this role, and hopefully the questions and the answers will give people what they need to give the most honest and objective evaluation of you as a candidate.
Yeah,
So I appreciate your time. And with that, I'll go ahead and get us closed out. So give me just a moment while I give this closing, and then
great.
we'll be done.
Awesome.
So
Thank you.
so everyone, that's all for this episode. If you're watching on YouTube, be sure to hit that subscribe button. Connect with me at LibertyDad on Facebook, LibertyDad Pod on Twitter, or send me love or hate mail to libertydadpodcast@gmail.com. I would love to hear from you. And remember, if you're a champion of liberty, your business is people and your product is liberty. Have a great week. Catch you next time. And I'm out.